Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Picard Season 1, Episode 9, Et in Arcadia Ego, Part 1. So this video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Picard. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Picard up to Season 1, Episode 9. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So this episode, it's the penultimate episode of Season 1. So it's basically a setup episode, setting up for the finale. They call it Part 1 of 2. I don't know if that's entirely necessary, but yeah. Anyway, so I don't know about this episode. Like, it was okay. There was things about it I liked. But I stand behind my statements that I made in previous weeks that this show is much better when it's more focused on just character beats. When it takes time out to do character studies, do character interactions. Whenever it tries to do plot heavy or action heavy or suspense heavy stuff, it gets a bit generic in my opinion, and it's not quite as strong. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think this is a bad episode, but I see a lot of flavorings of Discovery, of modern Trek in this episode. In particular, like one of the main complaints I had about Star Trek Discovery Season 2, which I did overall like Season 2 of Discovery, but one of the huge things I think they mishandled or did wrong was they often would overplay the melodrama or the sentimentality. Like they'd have a lot of people saying goodbye, or have these scenes like they had a funeral scene for a minor character we didn't know anything about that lasted like 5 minutes, where they had everyone singing, like that kind of unearned sentimentality where it goes like over the top with trying to make the audience feel emotional and trying to portray something really like sad or emotional or sentimental on screen, but it doesn't come across that way because they didn't really earn it. Like, you don't really know the characters very well, or they didn't earn the relationships very well. To juxtapose what I mean, let's talk about episode 7, where you had Picard and Riker. Now that really worked because that was the kind of sentimentality that was earned, particularly for anyone who has seen The Next Generation, because you had 7 years of character development on both these characters, and character development and how strong these characters' relationships were. And compare that to, say, Elnor and Picard, which we barely know who Elnor is. They didn't really do that good of a job of fleshing out this character or his relationship with Picard. We basically got one set of flashbacks at the start of one episode 5 weeks ago that explored the relationship, and yet they're expecting us to get really emotionally invested. And plus, like, the show's only been going for 9 episodes, and most of these characters weren't really introduced. And in the very first episode, they introduced them scatteredly throughout, and yet they were expected to feel this extreme emotional weight to these characters, like being sad over Picard's impending death. I mean, sure, we the audience can also relate with Picard, because that is a character we're very familiar with. But I feel like a lot of the sentimentality is not really on. Plus, like when Picard sees 709, he's like, "Oh, Seven," he's like, he's greeting an old friend. I'm like, "Oh, it's great to see you again," and "Oh, we're gonna come help us." And they barely know each other. Like, we only seen them interacting in the one episode, and that one episode, in my opinion, was extremely rushed. So I think this episode is very riddled with that same problem of the unearned sentimentality that or unearned melodrama that Star Trek Discovery Season 2 was plagued with. Now, getting more of the specifics, the episode starts off with a space battle, which was moderately exciting. I don't know, I didn't get too far I wasn't too invested in it. It seemed like a generic space fight until the Borg showed up, and I was like, "Holy shit! The Borg Q's are gonna show up. That's so awesome. That's so amazing. And they're gonna fight and save the day." But instead, like a bunch of flowers, just as soon as the Borg ship showed up, a bunch of flowers just came out of nowhere, enveloped the ship, and then brought the Borg ship down to the planet. I mean, that's extremely anticlimactic to me. I'm like, the space battle kind of dragged on a bit when it wasn't interesting, but just when it got interesting, they ended it. I'm like, I don't know. I think I heard criticism last week's episode that the 7 of 9 taking over the Borg Collective, that was a bit anticlimactic by the way the Romulan chick just blew all the Borg immediately out into space. Yeah, so I think they have problems with that. Like right when the stuff gets good, they just end it, and it becomes quite anticlimactic. But anyway, so I don't know about the thing with the huge flowers. That seems there's a lot of people pointing out there's been an ongoing motif with flowers throughout the season, which is fine. But I think this is kind of too on the nose, isn't it? Like having a motif with flowers is fine, but then having it seems like a hammer blow to the head to have like a giant flower come up and envelop the ship. But whatever. Anyway, so I will say on the positive note that I think the show did a really good job of withholding like what this planet was like what the society of androids was like, and I think they did a good job with the reveal of what it was like. I think it was very surreal. It showed it has like a sort of wonderful place and the diversity in it, and something that Picard absolutely was right to try to fight to protect. And yeah, because there's a lot of things the show did a really shitty job of keeping secret, mainly because they wanted to promote the show, like the fact that Riker and 709 were in it. But the android aspect of the show, they always actually did a really good job of keeping that under wraps. So I like that, and I like the way these characters interacted once they survived. Now, Agnes Jurati is a character I don't really buy. I think her journey this season is a bit too inconsistent to be believable, because she was like this shy cyberneticist who wanted to help the androids, but then Admiral O implanted this mind meld thingy in her head, and so now she desperately wanted to prevent this dark vision she saw, so to the fact where she killed a man she loved. And now all of a sudden she's kind of like gone back to thinking of the androids as beautiful creatures and wanting to help them and wanting to devote herself to them. I mean, I know some people might fight me on this because the episode tries to justify this itself by saying how regretful she is, and I think some of the scenes when Soji's talking to Picard about this, or talking about Jurati, about how much this eats her up, and we get scenes between her and Soon. I'll talk about Soon shortly, though. Don't you worry. But we get scenes with her and Soon where she talks about how much she regrets. So I know that the show is trying to justify these drastic character changes, but I don't think it quite works. I don't think it seems a bit forced to me. It doesn't seem natural. I don't quite buy it. I'm sorry. I know plenty of people probably will and be like, "Oh, you're wrong. The show has showed her character journey." I disagree. I don't think it worked. But for once, Raffi didn't bother me. I guess that's a positive. I'm finally starting to move beyond the character. Although, actually, I'm going to contradict myself there, because it's not so much that Raffi bothered me in this episode, as again, I don't buy her emotional journey. See, to me, this episode, again, it represents a lot of what Discovery doing, where it's having these huge payoffs that aren't really earned, and expecting you to feel all the sentimentality. In Raffi's case, she starts off the season like not wanting to, like pointing a gun at Picard, like not wanting to talk to him and saying, "Get the fuck away from me," and "How dare you," blah blah blah. And she maintained this attitude for most of the season. Now all of a sudden she's like, "I love you, Jean JL," and hugging, and it's like, again, that seems a bit unearned. That seems a bit drastic. And yeah, as I said, I never really liked the character. And as far as Rios goes, I don't know much. I don't think he's as developed. See, this is the problem with shorter seasons as compared to the larger seasons that other Trek shows used to have, is that when you have a 25 episodes or a season, by the end of the season you are like invested in the characters and they have been fully developed and all that. But when you have a shorter season with just 10 episodes, it's harder to do that. Now, I do know that some modern shows do accomplish this very well within short seasons, but I don't know. I think Star Trek. I think this show is still caught up in the Star Trek mentality, and plus, it just has way too many characters for them to develop these individual characters as much as the show is acting like they are. It's acting like we're completely invested in these characters when I'm still uncertain about it. I don't really know that much about who Rios is. I mean, I'm starting to like Rios. I like the potential of Rios. I like the potential of Elnor. I like the potential of some of these characters, but they haven't completely earned like the sentimentality that they're trying to. I know I'm just repeating myself, but and that is the big thing about this episode. Now, getting back to the positives, I do like Soji's storyline. She's one of those characters I think I do have a bit of a handle on, but even with her, I think I'm a bit unclear on her memories, because it seems like whenever it's convenient for her to remember something about her past, because she starts to show not even knowing she's an android, knowing zero about her past. By the way, they never really explained like why they did that, why they erased her memory. They never really explained what her mission was on the Borg ship, because there's other people were like, "Oh, did you complete your mission?" She's like, "Yes, but I bring bad news." You did what was your mission? Why was I don't know. Maybe some people will point it out to me. It's like, "Oh, Mark, you're missing it." They explained the mission. If so, they obviously did a bad job if I didn't get it. But anyway, so yeah. Let's talk about Soon. So, in an earlier episode, Maddox said, "Oh, me and Soon created the androids," and now a lot of people had assumed that he just meant that he went off of Dr. Nudi and Soon's work, and that helped him to create the androids. But I was questioning that, because it did seem like he was talking as if he was talking about an actual person that he was working with, which apparently is the case, because we learned that you have any excuse to bring Brent Spiner back. And they bring Brent Spiner back to play Dr. Soon's son, which is a retcon of epic proportions. I'm pretty sure. I'm rewatching TNG at the moment. I'll wait till I get to the episode Brothers, in which Dr. Soon actually appeared in, because I'm pretty sure he specifically said that he did not have a son, which is why he created Data. If he didn't outright say it, he definitely implied it. So, I mean, I wouldn't, even if you say that it's not violating canon, that's not really the point of a retcon. A retcon doesn't necessarily have to outwardly contradict something already established. To me, a retcon is also if it contradicts the spirit of something that was already established, like the implication, like the assumption that the story is based off of, even if it was never explicitly stated, which I think this definitely does. And he just pops up out of nowhere. I mean, as I said, it kind of foreshadowed him with Maddox saying that, but a lot of people just dismissed it as he was talking about Soon's work. And this character, I think the show's expecting us, the audience, to relate to this character because it's Brent Spiner, and we know Brent Spiner, and he's doing his Soon type thing. In fact, his performance here reminded me a lot of the performance of Soon Soon's like great grandfather or whatever, who appeared in Enterprise. There was a three-parter, if you're not familiar, in Enterprise, was taking place hundreds of years before. It's supposed to be one of Soon's ancestors. And I thought that annoys me whenever they do shit like that, because your ancestors don't look exactly like you. And so now Brent Spiner has played Dr. Soon, all Dr. Soon's, like some of Dr. Soon's creations, Data Lore before, and Dr. Soon's ancestor, and now Dr. Soon's son, and they all look exactly alike. Now, the android things you can explain away because they created them to look like fine, but the fact that his son, his great-great-grandfather, and everyone looks exactly the same, I know, now I'm getting into nitpicky territory, but it bothers me. And and this character just seemed to pop up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden putting all this importance on him as if we should know. I think they would have been better off if they just waited to introduce Bruce Maddox and introduced him here, because that, at least I feel personally that I would have more connection if these words were coming out of Bruce Maddox's mouth rather than this invented son of Noonien Soon, which I just think is ridiculous. I'm sorry, I think it's ridiculous. So we learn more about the prophecy, which I do find really interesting. I'm convinced more than ever that this will somehow tie into Control from Discovery, because if you think about it, Control was an artificial intelligence that Starfleet created. Now, we refer to the entity that was the villain throughout season 2 of Discovery as Control, but it wasn't really. It was another artificial intelligence that kind of took over Control, and became this powerful entity. So if we try to input this new mythology that is established here in Picard, we could say that was in fact the AI that took over Control and became the villain throughout season 2 of Discovery was in fact this artificial intelligence that's referenced here in this episode, this greater thing that's there to pounce like as soon as artificial intelligence reaches a certain level. So you could argue that Control reaches a certain level, so it came and took over Control and tried to wipe out humanity. But in this case, because the golden Soji, I can't remember what she's called, which I did like all the different androids we met, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a bit ridiculous that she could do a Vulcan mind, or a bit convenient, shall we say. It's like, why can she do a Vulcan mind meld? So the show can happen. Anyway, she's able to do Vulcan mind meld very conveniently, super convenient. I mean, fairly and inconvenient, super easy, fairly and inconvenient. Anyway, she can do a Vulcan mind meld, and she finds out about, she gets that same vision, but because she's synthetic, she can interpret it correctly because it drives organics insane. Because they see it as a warning, but it is basically saying the same thing, that artificial life will wipe out all. It's kind of, I don't know, this part of it seemed very Battlestar Galactica-ish to me. It's like, because that whole thing not only was about artificial life wiping out organic life because they fear them, but it's also the main theme of Battlestar Galactica was repetitive cycles. Like all of this has happened before, and it's going to happen again, and it's like things repeating itself. And so that seems to be the same thing, that this intelligent life is like, look, I know this happened to us, and it's going to happen again, so we're going to come back to help you in the case. So if an artificial life evolved to a certain point, humanity's, or not humanity, but organic life is going to try to wipe it out, because they always will. So we'll show up and help you wipe out all of organic life so you can survive. And then, of course, Golden Soji wants to wipe out all organic, wants to call these artificial life form to help them wipe out organic life, because they're about to get wiped out. So it's a self-preservation thing, so you can kind of see what's coming, and you definitely see that Soji's on the fence about this. I'm still not convinced that her because at the end of the episode, Picard spoke out against it, but they were all like, we gotta put Picard under house arrest because we can't have any doubts. And so she's like, yes, we do. I'm not 100%. I think that she's being sincere. She might just be putting on an act because I think Picard, her talks with Picard's kind of gotten to her. But I don't know. Like, I don't totally hate this storyline. I just don't. I don't know. It's something about it just kind of doesn't work for me on a level which I can't really articulate or fully understand. But it's just, I don't know. it seems, I just would have preferred if they went a different way. It's kind of predictable. I think that's what it is. It's more of a, it's something that is unoriginal. It's something we kind of seen a lot before, where there's a compound of people who are sort of, someone the audience cares for, thinks are good guys, but there's someone amongst them who, because they want to protect themselves, they want to do something evil, and they speak out against the main character and end up going against the main character because they want to, you can kind of understand that they're doing it out of desperation to protect themselves, but they're still being evil. I don't know. Something about it rings way too familiar to me, and I feel like they could have gone in a totally different direction than this. I don't know. I said that I liked this episode, but I seem to just be mostly complaining about it because I think there was a lot of potential here, and I think this episode is not terrible. Again, that's for sure. But it often zigs when it should have zagged. Like, it could have went in a way that would be more original, more interesting, but it says it instead it goes the more predictable route or the more uninteresting route. Not always. Like, I like the fact that Golden Soji ended up freeing Narek, which I still don't know what the point is or why she did that, but it's a very interesting aspect, and I think it's an interesting thread to leave hanging there. And of course, the overlooming threat of the Romulans coming to get them, like, that was very well accomplished. I did really much like that. And it's interesting because some of the androids, like, at first they're like helping Raffi, and Rios went back to the ship to repair it, and so they're all friends and all helping them, but it kind of turns at the end where Golden Soji announces she wants to call this AI to kill everyone. I don't know, because I heard last week that I think, to me, this would have been better if the whole prophecy was just a bunch of bullshit. And because that would have been more of a statement on how, like, the Romulans just assume, like, and they kind of play with it at the start of this episode. I thought they were going to go that direction because Golden Soji said that the Romulans have just misinterpreted it because it wasn't meant for organic minds. So I would have preferred if the message was actually not about wiping out all organic life, and that in fact the AIs, or synthetics if you prefer, pose no danger to organics, but these Romulans are just being fearful and misinterpreting it. To me, that would be a much stronger commentary on modern life and on how people can fear other races or other peoples or people from other places out of a sense of ignorance and feeling like they pose a threat when they don't really. But we didn't go that way. Instead, the AI actually does pose a threat, and the Romulans are about to be proven right. In fact, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy situation where, because the Romulans are trying to wipe out synthetics, it's going to force their hand to bring about this apocalypse that the Romulans are about to avoid. Now, that too is kind of interesting, but I personally would have preferred the other route of the Romulans being completely wrong. Maybe that's why I was a bit disappointed in this episode. But, and because the self-fulfilling prophecy thing is, I mean, that's all well and good, but I mean, that's kind of been overdone recently as well. So I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, I'd give my rating for this episode, part 1. I will wait to see what part 2 does. So my rating out of 10 for this episode, I'm gonna give it a I'm just torn between 5 and 6. Before I was thinking 7, but the more I talk, I'm like, this episode doesn't deserve a 7. I'll give it a 6. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. So I'll give this episode a 6 good, because there were some good aspects, there were some exciting aspects, there were some good character beats, and this particularly between Soji and Picard. And actually some of the Jurati stuff was interesting too, even though I think they kind of botched her storyline. But I already listed all my complaints about this episode. Chief amongst them is the whole Soon's son, who just seems to pop out of nowhere and we're supposed to give a fuck about him all of a sudden. Yeah, so and I think the over-sentimentality that reminds me way too much of Discovery Season 2, I think that's a problem. So they definitely could have handled this better, and frankly, I'm not that enthusiastic about the second part. I mean, it might be good, but I seriously doubt it's going to be great. But we'll see. So anyway, that's it for my review of this episode, the penultimate episode of Picard. I shall be back, of course, next week for the big finale of Star Trek Picard. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.